Iran's foreign minister will sit down with his European counterparts for talks in Geneva today. The outreach to Tehran comes after the US issued a 2-week deadline to decide on its possible involvement in the Israeli bombing campaign against Iran. British Foreign Secretary David Lammy says this time frame opens a window to achieve a diplomatic solution. But Iran is insisting it needs to see a halt in Israeli attacks before it holds negotiations with the United States.
ما با اروپایی ها همیشه گفتگو داشتیم. در موضوعات مختلف هم گفتگو کردیم. الان هم اگر حرفی دارن میشنویم. ما برای دفاع از حقوق مردم ایران که از چیزی خجالت نمیکشیم که از هیچ کس فراری نیستیم.
And for more on those talks in Geneva, we're joined by Will Denselow, live from Brussels. Will, Iran already making clear before talks even begin that it's not discussing its nuclear weapons program. European leaders have been urging de-escalation this week. But can we expect anything to come out of these talks?
Well, a short time ago, we heard from a spokesperson for the European Commission behind me laying out the position from the Commission. The spokesperson saying they would not prejudge the outcomes of these talks, but reasserted the Commission and the EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas's stance on this developing crisis, saying that they want to see a de-escalation and that they want to see a negotiated settlement. They believe that is the only viable outcome going forward. The message from the European Union, they say they are willing to speak to any relevant stakeholders to ensure that a negotiated settlement is eventually reached. We're getting some senses of the positions put forward by the so-called E3 plus Kaja Kallas, the E3, of course, including the UK, Germany and France. We've heard from a German representative saying they want assurances from Tehran when it comes to its nuclear and missile program. French President Emmanuel Macron this week has said that they want to see any kind of deal going forward to include assurances when it comes to the funding of Iran's proxies in the region. And significantly, as far as what Iran is requesting, well, they are urging these European members that are attending these talks in Geneva to do more to pressure Israel to cease their attacks on Iran.
Well, what weight would these talks have, given that we have 2 weeks, the US pausing, discussing, considering whether or not it wants to back Israeli action on Iran? Whatever the European powers decide, that would change, assuming the US decides to act or not to act in support of Israel.
Well, the actions of Donald Trump, the US president, are seen as absolutely paramount. Anything that European powers despite somewhat pales in comparison. But the question is, how much leverage do they have over both Washington and Israel going forward? That will be a huge question of these talks. As far as Iran's foreign minister will be concerned, certainly will be pushing that matter to the members of the E3 and Kaja Kallas, seeing what can be done as far as Tehran is concerned to get Washington to back away from these threats of joining these military operations conducted by Israel, as well as directly appealing for Israel to cease its attacks as well. Of course, this all comes amidst an incredibly busy time diplomatically. We'll see the likes of Germany, France, the UK meeting directly at the top level at the NATO summit next week. So there'll be face-to-face conversations between US and European delegations. So this is seen really as an opportunity for these European powers to glean exactly what Tehran is demanding, and will likely in the coming days dictate and try and translate that information onto their US counterparts. And of course, this all comes, as you rightly mentioned, with this within this crucial context that President Donald Trump has set this 2-week deadline in which he says he'll make a decision on whether indeed the US will join Israel in military operations.
Oh, thanks, Ed. Will Denselow, live from Brussels, looking ahead at these talks in Geneva. Top European diplomats meeting Iran's foreign minister to discuss what they can do diplomatically. Meanwhile, Israel continuing its strikes against Iran. The Israeli defense minister has ordered the military to intensify attacks on Iranian government targets. There was more bombardment overnight by both the two nations. The Israeli military says it carried out a wave of strikes targeting dozens of Iranian military facilities and a nuclear research site. The IDF says it hit missile production sites and a research plant that it says is used in Iran's nuclear weapons project. Iran launching at least one barrage of missiles today, striking near residential apartments, office buildings and industrial facilities in the southern Israeli city of Beersheba. This escalating conflict prompting countries to evacuate their citizens from the region. A growing list of nations has shuttered embassies in Tehran and are moving nationals out of harm's way. Australia amongst the latest to suspend its diplomatic mission in Iran, citing a deteriorating security situation. Other countries such as Romania, China, India and Germany have begun repatriating their residents out of Israel and Iran. Many others arranging chartered flights. Several airlines are halting their flights to the warring sides and nearby Middle East destinations. Shipping giant Maersk announcing it is temporarily terminating vessel calls to Israel's Haifa port. The site was subjected to missile attacks over the past week.